Nick? Okay, there it is. Yes, thank you.
Just check to make sure that everything's tight.
We're good? Good evening. Today is Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. And I'd like to call the Committee of a Whole meeting to order. Mr. Deputy Clerk, please read the roll.
Council President Collins Bellamy.
Here.
Majority Leader Rubo.
Here.
Majority Whip Robinson.
Present.
Minority Leader Breen.
Here.
Council Member Pineda Isaac. It's just that she was in the chamber. She'll be back shortly. Council Member Tasha Diaz.
Present.
Council Member Anthony Moranti is not here. He's absent.
Okay. Deputy Clerk, do we have any speakers?
We do, Council President. We have 36 speakers signed up this evening.
Okay. Before you go into the rules of tonight's Committee of a Whole meeting, I would just make an announcement for everyone here. I'm sure that most of you are here for item 15 on the agenda, which is the ceasefire item. And after the outpouring of comments from the public via email, via phone call, we have decided that this item is not going to be voted on this evening. It's going to go into committee, into the Intergovernmental Committee. So there will not be a vote on the ceasefire resolution tonight. Everyone that signed up still gets to speak because it's currently on the agenda. So everyone that signed up to speak is welcome to still speak, but there will not be a vote on the item tonight. Okay? I just wanted to notify you all of that. And if you could advise of the rules.
Okay, folks, when you step up to the microphone, you will be given 3 minutes to speak. If you can clearly state your name and your address. I'm going to call out names. I will apologize ahead of time for mispronunciation. But again, when you step up to the microphone, if you can clearly state your name and your address for the record, that would be great. So the first speaker.
Wait, you didn't talk about how much time they have.
They are given. You're given 3 minutes to speak. Each person is given 3 minutes to speak.
Once the timer goes off, due to the large number of people we have signed up to speak, if the timer goes off, we ask that you respect everyone else's time to speak. Please take any phone calls outside in the hallway. Once the timer goes off, if you're still speaking, we ask that you stop so that we can get to all 36 people on the list. Additionally, we ask that you respect everyone's questions and comments when they're speaking and do not interrupt. Okay? Thank you all. The first speaker.
Council President, the first speaker is Manaf Asalfan.
Please step up to the podium if you are here.
Most of our, they're downstairs. I mean, they're checking them. So I think we should give them.
Okay, so we'll go through the list and then we'll recall.
Okay, that's fair.
The next person is Hafa bin Kadi.
Good evening, council members and community. So I have a question because I prepared something to speak tonight based on the resolution. And if the resolution isn't going to be passed, then I'd like to save my speech, but I have a question. Will we be able to speak again when the resolution is up for passage?
So generally, the council is not allowed to speak during the committee of a whole. But to answer your question, whenever there is an item on the agenda, during the committee of the whole, any community member is allowed to come speak for 3 minutes on an item that's on the agenda. So the answer to the question is yes. The answer to the question is yes.
So it'll be on the agenda again. Okay.
Right now, it's going to a committee. When the item is on an agenda again, you will be able to speak at a committee of a whole.
Okay, then I will reserve my time for then. Thank you very much.
Okay.
The next speaker is Roddy Jamal.
Hello, my name is Abdullah. I am 12 years old.
Can he not say the address for security purposes?
As long as you say you live in the city of Yonkers, that's fine, or wherever you live.
He's a community member of Yonkers.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Abdullah. I am 12 years old. I am here today to be the voice of the voiceless. I am here to represent the 15,000 children who were murdered by Israel and the thousands of kids who no longer have a shoulder to cry on. The children whose family members that have been abducted who cry alone. The children whose family members are still stuck under rebel, may be dead or may be injured. I'm here to represent the kids that are starving to death due to Israel's war crimes. None of these atrocities would be possible to take place without our tax dollars. We need an immediate and permanent ceasefire. There has never been a country who refers to themselves as democratic yet kills 50,000 civilians. There was never a civilized nation that targets kids. Would a democratic country say things like, no Palestinian children are innocent, and refer to us as human animals? Land you have to die for is your land. Land you have to bomb is not. I understand that your job is to take care of the people in Yonkers, while unfortunately the people of Yonkers are contributing millions of their tax dollars unwillingly to help fund this genocide. How is it possible that a country that believes in rights, freedoms, and justice for all needs to be convinced that killing children is not okay? Together, we could put pressure on the White House to cut military aid immediately. Gaza is about the same size as Yonkers, yet it has 1.2 million people living in it, even more before. I want to inform people the population in Gaza isn't so high because of the birth rate. The population is so high because whenever the Palestinian land and home gets stolen from an Israeli settler in the West Bank, the original homeowners are forcibly removed and placed in Gaza. On November 7, Palestinian children like myself held a press conference in Gaza to ask the world to help. These kids barely speak English, but were able to say,
That's not you. If you could just wrap up your comments, please.
We come out now to shout and invite you to protect us. We want to live, we want peace, we want to live like the other children.
The next speaker is Jenna Alshager.
Hello, my name is Jenna. I'm 15 years old. Did you know that in Gaza, if you're lucky enough to make it to my age, you have already witnessed and survived 4 wars? This time actually isn't even considered a war, it's a genocide. As you may know, over 50,000 innocent people have died, including 14,000 children in Gaza over the span of less than 7 months. You might be thinking, why am I bringing this up here in Yonkers? Yonkers contributes a little less than $3 million of American tax dollars to help fund the genocide in Gaza. So when people say America first, or this has nothing to do with America, yes it does. It's time to prioritize Americans instead of arming Israel for their war crimes. Instead of using our tax dollars to fund this genocide, why don't you use it for important things like help remove the homeless out the streets, healthcare, and better education for the American people? I can't believe that since October there has been an ongoing genocide in Gaza. It hurts to know that there are people out there with no care in the world for the innocent lives being taken day by day. Think about your people and the people you love most. Imagine that all being taken away and seeing the people you love die a slow and painful death. I can't believe that any civilized nation who believes in rights needs convincing that this isn't okay. Where's the love? Where's the humanity? The people in Gaza have no human rights and are literally starved to death. The whole world is sitting back and letting a genocide unfold in front of their eyes. I would also like to mention that my dad was born and raised in Jerusalem, and unfortunately, you guys sitting behind the desk have more rights to go to Jerusalem than we do. All we're asking for is a permanent ceasefire to stop funding this genocide. You could see the images and videos of the horrific attacks happening in Gaza live on social media. No one can convince you that what is happening is okay. Every innocent individual deserves to live without fear and violence. To think of the fear these kids have to endure just from the noises of the bomb is enough to break the hearts of anyone who actually has one. As we're speaking and debating about this, the people in Gaza are being starved to death and bombed at the same time. Voting for a permanent ceasefire is the least we could do as humans. Please don't let money, propaganda, or media lies make you turn your back on humanity at a time they need you most. As Malcolm X once said, "I've had enough of someone else's propaganda. I'm for truth, no matter who tells it. I'm for justice, no matter who it is for or against. I am a human being first and foremost, and as such, I'm for whoever and whatever benefits humanity as a whole." I ask you to find it in your heart to be on the right side of history. Thank you.
Anan Elzager.
Hello, my name is Adnan. I'm here today to speak on behalf of all Palestinians. I know that I have hope for you all to call for a ceasefire because regardless of what's happening, I believe there are people left in this world with good hearts. I'm fasting right now, but I do have to say, this Ramadan has been easy because whenever I think of my hunger, I think of the images coming out of Gaza of the children being starved to death. Israel is also using starvation as a weapon of war. I believe that you were able to work yourselves up to the position you have now because you care about people. I need you to realize that being silent in this situation will be equivalent to being silent during the Holocaust or slavery. We're living in a time now where we could play a role in saving people's lives. Netanyahu is a psychopathic war criminal who no one should side with. He can't bomb our future. All hostages should be released, including all Palestinian hostages. I hope you could put all Zionist propaganda and lies to the side and realize, regardless of what they say or do, there are children alive and dead under rubble because of Israel with the help of our tax dollars. If my grandparents didn't seek refuge in 1948 during the Nakba, I'd be a kid in Gaza suffering like these children are, waiting on adults overseas to decide if bombs should end or not, while other adults call it self-defense. The whole world is sitting back and watching this genocide unfold before their eyes, with pity and empathy in their hearts, but that's not enough to stop this genocide. United, we can make a difference, and it's time to rise up for humanity. I know people do care, but there's something or someone stopping them from speaking up. But it's time to listen to your hearts and make the right move. The way I see it, you're here as congressmen and women right now, but when you leave, your fathers, sons, mothers, and daughters, people who value family. So please understand, we value our families as well. Nothing justifies killing 15,000 kids, not self-defense or human shields as they claim. Nothing justifies the loss of a life of a child. I believe that after months of devastation, the future can be brighter, and that if humanity rises up, we can help save my brothers and sisters in Gaza. I kindly ask you to support the community's resolution and not the City Council's proposed version. The City Council's version clearly wants to erase Palestine off the map, in which I can assure you, regardless of today's outcome, that will never happen. I hope you could all choose to be on the right side of history. I'd like to end it off with the quote by Malcolm X. If you're not careful, the newspaper will have you hating the people that are being oppressed and loving the people that are doing the oppression. Thank you for your time.
The next speaker is Abdallah.
He went.
Rog Drew. Rog Drew is the next speaker.
They're holding people downstairs when they shouldn't be, that are speakers.
Excuse me, as I mentioned, if the person's name is called and they don't answer, we will call their names again, but we're going to go through the list. Please, no outbursts in the chambers. We are going to be fair. We're going to allow people the opportunity to speak. If their name is called and they don't answer, we're taking note, and we will call their name again.
Jeremy Vargas.
My name is Jeremy. I'm a Yonkers. I live in Yonkers, and I'm a member of the Lower Hudson Valley Democratic Socialists of America. For 75 years, since the Nakba of 1948, Palestinians have been dispossessed of their indigenous lands and forced to live under a brutal occupation. They've been living under an apartheid state where, when they're not being murdered, they're being deprived of their right to live in dignity each and every single day. This is not a democracy. This fall was Israel dropping any remaining pretense, and the numbers just themselves tell a horrific story. Over 30,000 Palestinians have been murdered by Israel since last October. But if you've remotely seen the news or gone on social media, it's impossible to not have seen the real extent of the horror. It's even worse than just indiscriminate murder. This is Israel maximizing casualties, maximizing damage, because the goal is genocide. And we're here because our American tax dollars are paying for this. Our Congress is sending the bombs. Our president is covering for Israel's atrocities in the public eye, and our U.S. institutions are all complicit, including local government here, which means we have a responsibility to take action. A ceasefire to save lives is the bare minimum that Palestinians deserve. That's been the case already since last year. So how many dead Palestinians will it take for our city to join the calls for a proper ceasefire? The resolution that was placed on the agenda is not what our coalition has been fighting for. This is a state with rights for only one people and apartheid for the rest. It's not a democracy. And condolences for the oppressor and crickets for the oppressed, that's not neutral. We cannot accept it as it is. So to do so would be an insult to Palestinians here and across the movement. But our city can do much, much, much better. So pass the ceasefire resolution our coalition has been fighting for instead. Thank you.
Next speaker is Adil Sarar.
That's Hanadi Sarar. How are you? How you doing, everybody? Thank you for all being here and listening to...
I'm sorry. You're on the list also, but Hadil...
Oh, Hadil Sarar.
Yes.
By the way, I'm Hanadi Sarar, so it's
Yes.
very close. Okay, Hadil. My cousin.
Yeah, we're getting you the whole family in here. This is Hadil Sarar. I'm a Yonkers resident and part of the Ceasefire Coalition. And we have been present for the past 2 months, every single week, so we get to know each other more. On January 31st, we urged you to look into the ceasefire resolution proposal as an urgent matter, as you should have considered the death of a child every single 5 minutes in Gaza. The death toll exceeded 25,000 back on February. And there was an extreme violation of humanity by Israel military in Gaza every moment. Israel has left no sacred institution unattacked: mosques, churches, colleges, hospitals, home, and full neighborhoods. After 2 months, the death toll is approaching more than 35,000. 10,000 differences between first time we initiated this proposal. 2 months later, we receive a resolution that the council created that it's drastically different than what we proposed. A resolution that frames the reality as if history started only on October 7th. As if the past 75 years of struggle, displacement, oppression, theft, and killing of Palestinians have never happened. You mentioned Hamas violently attacked thousands of innocent Israeli men, women, and children, which is true. And then you follow it up with a statement: following the event of October 7th, widespread armed conflict erupted within Gaza between Israel and Hamas. So Israel violently attacked, killing 1,130 people in Israel, but a war erupted suddenly, and you did not hold Israel accountable, not whatsoever. Then you added our city mourns the assault upon and killing of Israel on October 7th, the continued unjust captivity of the innocent hostages in Gaza, and the subsequent displacement of injuries to and the loss of life of Palestinian. Again, you're justifying the genocide on Palestinian and ignoring the fact that Israel had administratively detained more than 1,000 Palestinians in the West Bank since October 7th. These prisoners have not been charged. Many are sentenced without trial to indefinite detention. which are hostages by definition. And then we highlighted one of the main whereases that you added. We recognize the right of Israel people to live in Israel in peace and the existence of democratic Jewish state. Israel can either be committing a genocide or a democratic state, but it cannot be both. The recent reports, testimonies, and the footages, as well as the ICJ decisions, had all shown scenes of genocide. This is reality. The history did not start on October 7th. I'm finishing up. The history is our displaced, genocided ancestors. The history is our grandparents' tears when they tell us about their farms and houses in the villages that the Israel burned down in 1948. The history is our parents who grow up in Palestinian refugee camps, in the diaspora in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, where they lived hungry under the cold, having to work instead of going to school, sacrificing their dreams in order to survive. And all of that because their land was stolen and they were displaced to begin with. The history...
ask that you wrap it up. I'm sorry.
The history is starting in the Nakba, 1948, 1967, Israel war in Gaza, 2008, 2009, 2012, 2014, 2018, 2021.
Ms. Patil, we're going to ask that you wrap it up.
This is history. My last sentence. History is 2024. Yonkers City Council left a ceasefire resolution to end the genocide pending in their inbox for more than 2 months, and then decided after all to put forward a resolution that was against the testimonies of their constituents. History is what you are witnessing tonight, what you're hearing from your constituents, and history is the result of your votes. Choose what you want this history to be saying about you next year.
The next speaker is Fatin Gerard. Moving on to Gigi Tin.
I stand here today with my friends and family. First generation Palestinian American, second generation Palestinian American. John Rubel, Edgewood, Maple, Kimball, Midland. Does that ring a bell? I sat here listening to you all address developments and major issues. I sat here in the town hall meetings. Not one has addressed a major issue that we've been having in our neighborhoods. I purchased my home in 2016, and since then I've experienced 20 floods. Not rainstorm water, but unsanitary water, which is sewer water, sewage. I'm in such disappointment because listening to you all discuss the projects and developments, but not once has it been for the neighborhoods. But I'm a tax-paying homeowner that funds all these developments in Yonkers. My point to the statement today is, since you don't care to resolve these major issues we have in the neighborhoods of Yonkers, who are tax-paying families, the very least you could do is pass a ceasefire resolution. That's my statement.
Tejana Sanchez. Jordan Alexander Mendez.
Hello, how's everybody doing? I'm just going to start off by beginning and getting straight to the point. I'm proudly African American, if you couldn't tell. Born from and raised by a black woman, she emphasizes the importance of adequate representation of marginalized struggle and the necessity to advocate for the advancement of our people. Now, historically, the city of Yonkers has embraced change, being a beacon of development, equity, and diversity, especially ethnically. I'm no stranger to the efforts the city has made to support these groups. Now, that being said, it's disheartening to see my home city fail to represent a marginalized group who shares the same struggles that we've combated hitherto. I understand it's no easy task to stand up and speak, but to be honest, that's why we're all here right now. As officials, surely you find it imperative to vote. Think of this resolution, passing this resolution, as the city equivalent of voting. When voting, I'd hope you vote for something that optimizes the conditions of your given circumstances. When doing this, you'll naturally be inclined to side with something that speaks truth to circumstance and efficiently progresses the aforementioned conditions. In this instance, it's your job to vote for the truth, a truth that isn't fully depicted in the current resolution that's on today's agenda, but one that is depicted in the Westchester for Palestine Coalition ceasefire resolution. The current ceasefire resolution on today's agenda doesn't acknowledge Israel's atrocities, doesn't acknowledge Israel's 76 years of occupation, doesn't acknowledge the West Bank, and doesn't even call for release of Palestinian hostages. As Americans, we believe in a democratic republic. Republic etymologically meaning thing of the people. Now, that isn't to say that you don't have a say on these matters, but it's to say that representing your people is your biggest responsibility, and the most effective way to fulfill this responsibility, however hard and uncomfortable it may be, is to pass our resolution. That's what I have written down, but now I want to address all of you personally. I've met Corazon, Deanna, Lakeisha. My friend Daniel Brown has personally met with Tasha Diaz, and I haven't gotten to speak to you yet. But I do understand that all of you have somewhere in your heart the ability to represent people. And that is your job here, and that's what I'm calling upon today. With my last 40 seconds, I just want to say that I've been a youth advocate. I've been to Albany calling for the betterment of our funds, saying that we need more funding for students. I've done community charity events. I've done everything that I can to support this city. And to acknowledge that there is almost $2.9 million that isn't going back to our community because it's funding a genocide in another country is wrong. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker is Carlos Alonso.
Good evening, members of City Council. My name is Carlos Alonso. I was born and raised in the city of Yonkers, and my family comes from Puebla, Mexico, when they were threatened because of political violence backed by a corrupt police state with weapons and guns manufactured in this country. I am not Palestinian, but this is also our struggle, to stand in solidarity and fight alongside people who are fighting for freedom and liberation of all kinds, even the kinds where a community can have a say about whether or not they want developers coming into their neighborhoods and tearing things apart with total disregard for the people who have lived here all their lives, disregard for the people who go to our schools, who work in our buildings, who live in our homes, and bring life into a city of ever-increasing luxury development. The displacement going on in Yonkers is not different than the displacement going on in Palestine. Communities all over Yonkers and across the state and nation are facing unprecedented challenges, rising costs of living, increased homelessness, and lack of economic security and justice, and much, much more. And our nation's response, as reaffirmed by this city council, has been, let's continue to send our tax dollars to fund war and genocide and illegal occupation overseas. Our response has been, let's dehumanize, let's criminalize, let's terrorize our supporters, allies, and people of Palestine. The people of Yonkers are no different than the people of Palestine. We all deserve a life of dignity and peace, without violence, without fear of intimidation, and that is why we and you must join the communities urging you to pass our version of a ceasefire resolution that more reflects the demands of the Palestinian people and not your version. And I will continue to support this coalition of groups and supporters and communities who are asking for the same thing, to send a message loud and clear to stop the violence and leave the Palestinian people free. Thank you.
Next speaker is Kristen Anderson.
Hello. Just to say that I think it's terrible that you're putting off doing the resolution this week, since people are being killed and dying, starvation and disease every day in Gaza. I want to read a poem by a Palestinian poet, very short, by Marwan Makul. In order to write poetry that isn't political, in order to write poetry that is not political, I must listen to the birds. And in order to listen to the birds, the warplanes must be silent. So let's let him write poetry that isn't political, okay? Let's stop the warplanes.
Michael Middleman.
Good evening, members of the Yonkers City Council. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you this evening on the proposed and now tabled resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. My name is Michael Middleman, and I'm an officer of the Westchester Jewish Council, the central coordinating and resource organization for the Westchester Jewish community, including Jewish residents of Yonkers. While tonight is the first time that I've engaged with the Yonkers City Council about this issue, I have followed the story of the resolution online. From that online discussion, I know that you have refused to be bullied into adopting language that would only increase hatred towards Jews that has exploded since October 7th. Instead, you have approached this issue seriously, in good faith, and with respect and sensitivity for the entire community, and I commend and thank you for that. That said, I thank you for tabling the resolution tonight and respectfully ask that you not approve any ceasefire resolution about this war. Even though you have tried to be fair, I fear that your attempt at striking balance will be lost as soon as the resolution is approved and leaves your control. That's because this resolution would simply be used as a data point by people who call for Israel's destruction to support an outrageous premise that Israel is the villain in its just war to defeat the terrorist organization Hamas and bring home the hostages. Look no further than the proposed title of the tabled resolution, a resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza, which would be weaponized to suggest that Yonkers has joined the chorus, placing all responsibility on Israel to stop the fighting. Never mind the fact that Hamas indiscriminately fired several more rockets at Israel, each one a war crime, after the IDF withdrew from southern Gaza earlier this week. Even though people in this community care deeply about the war between Israel and Hamas, that alone does not mean that this issue is something that must be addressed by the Yonkers City Council. This council's time would be better served on the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Yonkers, matters that are addressed by other items on this evening's agenda, for example. Let us not spend time and effort on a performative resolution regarding a matter of foreign policy that has no direct effect on the city or people of Yonkers, or for that matter, the people of Israel and Gaza. The only thing ceasefire resolutions do is give an excuse for people who hate Israel to act on that hate against Jews here. Thank you for tabling this resolution tonight. Thank you.
Scott Dubin.
Thank you for allowing me to address this council. Those that have spent the last months pushing for this resolution, the ceasefire resolution, would have you believe that they are peace-loving activists. This is a lie. They are the radical fringe of a few small organizations loosely connected by a common hatred of Israel. They travel in and out of the city, attending rallies, and they are desperate to export that style of protest to Yonkers and the rest of Westchester. Rallies where the flags of terrorist organizations are flown, the lives of hardworking New Yorkers are disrupted, attacks against the police, harassment of Jews. So they pop up. This same coalition pops up in other city councils, New Rochelle, White Plains. So far, every city council in Westchester has rejected them. They are counting on you to overlook this. They are counting on you to overlook their calls for violence, their justification of rape and murder, and to pretend with them for just a moment that they are powerful and influential. It's a playbook being enacted nationwide. I warn you, if you bend, they will keep coming. That is their plan. When they don't get their way, they trade in conspiracy theories, privately, imagining a world where all-powerful Jews are responsible for all the wrong in their life. When this city council differed with them on the language of this resolution, they released private conversations with members of city council publicly, and then accused the city council of being the specter of Zionism. Dog whistles. These are lies. These pervasive lies have gone viral. From the river to the sea, resistance is justified. And their personal favorites: liberation by all means necessary, a dog whistle in defense of October 7th. A weekly vigil for the martyrs, a dog whistle. Choosing to intentionally blur the lines to convince people to cheer for dead terrorists. When Representative Bowman, as reported in Politico...
Hold on one second, Mr. Dubin. There will not be any outburst during anyone's remarks. There will not be any outbursts, or you will be asked to leave this chamber. Thank you. You may continue.
When Representative Bowman, as was reported in Politico, called the accounts of rape and murder of Israelis propaganda and lies, it was them that organized the rally and them that applauded his words. We simply have the receipts. Members of the City Council, do not give in to their bullying. Reject them as they have been rejected by other city councils throughout the county. They will simply use every opportunity to seek a platform in government to spread their hate and lies. Show moral clarity. Thank you for tabling this resolution. Reject the premise upon which it was advocated for. The people of Yonkers and the Jewish community stand with you against this bullying because you have stood with us. Thank you.
Rabbi Benjamin Krause.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address this council. My name is Benny Krause. I'm the principal of a Jewish school in Riverdale, working with children. I would like to speak on behalf of my friends, Tomer and Amit Ades, former residents of Kibbutz Kfar Aza in Israel, and their children, Ori, 7, Shir, 5, Eli, 2. On October 6th, there were no Israeli troops in Gaza, and all Israeli residents who once lived there were removed by the Israeli government in the unilateral disengagement of 2005, almost 20 years ago. At 6:30 on that day, under unrelenting rocket fire, 800 terrorists stormed the kibbutz. For 36 hours, they were hit by bullets, RPGs, grenades. They learned how to tell the difference between these different weapons. Their babysitter was taken hostage. Their adopted grandmother was butchered. 65 of their friends, men and women and children, were slaughtered. Some of them were burned alive. Others were taken hostage and dragged across the border. Tomer and Amit were presumed dead when they called their mother. She did not believe that they were alive. Their house was marked as conquered. The only reason they survived was a fluke, which allowed them to live today with their kids. 5 of their friends remain in Gaza as hostages today. Hamas rejected another ceasefire today. Their middle son, Shir, celebrated his birthday. They found one candle and a piece of cake, and they used a kitchen pot for a toilet. And they watched SpongeBob 8 times, which they thankfully had downloaded by mistake.
Please, no
before
pictures
they
in the
lost
chamber.
power. Excuse me?
No pictures and posters in the chamber.
Just imagine that. I would ask you to consider, would you ask your country to refrain from protecting its children from these unprovoked acts of terror? Would you call for a ceasefire with 134 of your family members held hostage, sexually assaulted and tortured? Would you allow the perpetrators of these heinous crimes to continue to live on your borders in the Bronx or in Mount Vernon? And they promised to continue to attack, to do exactly what they did. They said they will do it again. Today at 1:10, my phone, which has the red alert app, because I was in Israel last week, went off because rockets were fired at that same kibbutz today. We are saddened by all loss of innocent life. We yearn for the opportunity for brothers and sisters in Israel to live in peace with their neighbors. 1.5 million Israeli Arabs attend universities, serve as doctors, swim in the Sea of Galilee, travel freely as citizens of the State of Israel. Israelis, Arabs, Jews, Christians, and Muslims who cherish life. I believe that we all cherish life, and everybody in this city cherishes life. Let us respect life. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we continue, for anyone that came in late and may not know, the resolution has been tabled and will not be voted on tonight. But I also want to remind you all there will be no outbursts when anyone is speaking. We are asking that you all respect everyone's 3 minutes to speak. If someone is not here when they're called, we will recall their names. Thank you.
And folks, before I call the next name, I just want to remind you, you're given 3 minutes. Can you please wrap up your comments in that time frame? The next speaker is Dania Khalad.
Hi everyone, my name is Dania Khalad and I've been a lifelong resident of Yonkers. It's unfortunate that we're tabling the resolution for another week. I guess more lives will be lost in the meantime. I stand before you as a Palestinian American. And just some historical context, my father and his family were displaced in 1948 during the Nakba, also known as the catastrophe. My mother and her family were displaced in 1967 during the Six-Day War. They both grew up as refugees in Jordan. I remember 2008. It was Obama was running for president. It was my first eligible opportunity to vote as an American citizen. I remember being really excited to vote, and I remember vividly my mother telling me the government doesn't care about us. And I thought, what does she know? 18-year-old me dismissed her statement. But as of recently, especially in the last 6 months, her words echo so loudly because I've watched my people get murdered in the most heinous and vicious ways. And there's been minimal to zero regard for Palestinian life. And unfortunately, she was right. I stand before you all in hope that next week, when it is time to pass that you all vote to pass the resolution. We are in a critical moment in history. All lives should be given the same regard. And I encourage you all to be on the right side of history. Thank you so much for...
Next speaker. The next speaker is Haned Sarar.
Yes, good evening. My name is Haned Sarar. I am a member of the Muslim American Society. I also am the director of the Andalusia Islamic School in Yonkers. I had the pleasure in meeting all of the council members in some of our iftars. So I had, except for a couple, but I had the pleasure to speak to each and every one of you. And I know for a fact that you all have hearts. You all are human beings who value the life of the people who are oppressed. And the lies that come out of the news and all this, the news that they feed to our people are all lies. These are not true stories. They make them up. They make them up to make a propaganda and to make the Palestinians or the Muslims look bad, when in reality, they are the ones who are raping, killing, and stopping the food from coming into Gaza and everywhere else. They keep saying Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. What about in the West Bank where there is no Hamas? What about when they walk into the people's doors, knocking on their doors, open, open, let me get their child. I saw them holding a rock, take him into court without any charges and holding them in the court without
any news for the parents. I don't know if they are alive or dead. They don't know if these kids are alive or dead. What about that? What about my parents when they were kicked out of their house in 1948? My grandparents, and then in 1967, my parents were kicked out. My mother walked 7 days in war. They walked, and their family members were dying and falling as they're walking out because the Israelis had to invade Palestine. We lived in peace with the Jewish people and the Christians and the Catholics. We lived in peace back then. But they had to invade our homes and take my grandmother died last March, and she died with the key of her house in her hand. As she was dying, she said, I want to go back to my house in Palestine. She said that. I'm Palestinian, and I'm afraid to go back to Palestine to see my village. I'm afraid because I know, because my background is Palestinian, that they are going to attack me and make me wait on the borders for hours and hours to make me give up and not go and visit. And that's the truth, because my friends tell us the stories. They do. They tell us the stories. This woman gave birth on the border. It's an apartheid state. It's not the same. Think about Nelson Mandela. Wasn't he classified as a terrorist at one point? Right? He's a hero now. Please, council people, please. These people have nowhere to go. They're in an open prison, no food, no medical supplies. They are cutting their feet and their hands without anesthesia. We see firsthand. The social media right now is revealing the truth. They're liars.
Can you wrap up the comments?
Okay, last quick story.
Wrap it up. It's 3 minutes. We have to allow others to speak.
Girl ran after her dead mother. I know her. It's her hair. That's my mother, she said, when they took her away.
Thank you.
Thank you, council people.
The next speaker is Ziad Ramadan. Ziad. Brandon Nader is the speaker to follow. Brandon, you're up. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hello, Council. In Israel, I saw a protest against...
And you're Ziad?
Say again?
What is your name?
Ziad Ramadan.
Okay.
Thank you. In Israel, I was watching TV and I saw a protest against Bibi Netanyahu, and there was a sea of Israeli flags, proud Israelis, and they were protesting against Bibi Netanyahu, and they had a picture of Bibi Netanyahu, and he had a Hitler mustache. Because his own people recognize the fact that he is imposing a genocide on the Palestinian people. There's a death march of 1.5 million people from the north to the south of Gaza. They are intentionally impeding relief efforts to coming in and trying to starve 1.5 million people who are sitting down there in Rafah trying to get out. And 750,000 of them have been, by relief agencies, told that they are on death's door. Maybe he thinks he can save some bullets and just have mass death through starvation, because the explosions and the billions of dollars that he buys from our country for weapons to completely eradicate and wipe out the entire Palestinian people. But I want to talk about the ceasefire resolution. We all know it's a genocide. Everybody knows it's a genocide. And the only thing that prevents the whole world from openly saying it's a genocide is the political and financial power of the Zionist movement, who has invested all of its effort into buying our politicians and buying our elections. AIPAC, with its own announcement, said we're going to $100 million we're going to invest into tearing apart the squad and taking out the elected leaders like you guys who look like you. They want to eradicate all the best open people who speak truth to power, and they want to erase them from our political system to just have bobbleheads who just say yes to Israel and everything. That's treason, because this is America. and America comes first, but instead they want Israel to come first. That's what AIPAC wants. It says it on its website, and why it's not a foreign agent is beyond us. And that's what Zionism represents. Zionism represents the complete eradication of not only Muslims, but Christians as well. Videos of them spitting at priests. I don't have to tell you. You know. If I was to try to tell you, I would claim that you're ignorant. And I don't think you're ignorant. I think you're all brilliant. And I think you know what the truth is. And we asked for a ceasefire resolution in order to say, let's create peace. Let's talk about what represents people from Yonkers. Is it a genocide? Councilman Bream? Is that what it is? A genocide that we're going to support? Or is it a desire for peace for all peoples to represent as you, in your constituents? You have to tell me that in Colonial Heights or other wards, that your constituency want this war to continue. Because if you don't do that, then you're not representing your wards. A ceasefire resolution should represent peace, not represent a Zionist AIPAC agenda. Thank you.
The next speaker is Brandon Nader, followed by Miriam Chiotti.
Good evening, members of the City Council President, members of City Hall. Because it was tabled today, cut it short. I was a little surprised to see this on the agenda, so short notice. I was surprised to get a message last night asking me if I could come tonight to speak against this resolution. While I'm happy it's tabled, I'm still upset about its current form, and I trust you guys to speak to local Jewish leaders to figure out how we're going to move forward while this is in committee. The first paragraph dumbs down October 7th into just murder, but leaves out the rape and torture of Israeli residents, tourists, photos online that I knew I couldn't bring here, that I refused to email you because of the horrid images. I would rather have been murdered than when one of the Israelis brought across the border or tortured and raped. That's what we're talking about here when we talk about a ceasefire. We're talking about making peace with terrorists. It's not happening. Thank you.
Miriam Chiotti. Miriam.
Good evening, Council. My name is Miriam Choate. I'm a concerned Yonkers resident, homeowner, and educator. I'm here to speak against the Council's wildly inappropriate proposed resolution, a whitewashing of the reasonable and respectful ceasefire resolution proposed by your constituents and the ceasefire coalition, which had nothing to do with other ceasefire passages in other areas. That's incorrect. It seems that as if you and the council and the mayor want to pat yourselves on the back for passing something, even if it's hollow and insulting. We say no. I teach 3-year-old preschool children, and each day for the last 6 months, my heart breaks as some new horror, some new Israeli tactic for killing and starving children in Gaza appears across my phone screen. CNN reports, we trust CNN, right? CNN reports that 13,000 children have now been killed in Israel by Israel in Gaza, 19,000 now orphaned, 12,000 children injured. Caring for and meeting the needs of little ones and their families requires me, full stop, to condemn Israel. This great state certified me to keep other people's babies safe day to day, and yet my Yonkers taxes pay for Gaza's children to be maimed and for our law enforcement officers to travel abroad to be trained. Make it make sense. We are all complicit, trying to put food on the table here while our hard-earned Yonkers tax dollars go to Israel to the tune of almost $3 million annually. My family came to Yonkers from the deep south. I come from ministers, anti-segregationists, and World War II anti-fascist soldiers who fought and killed Third Reich Nazis and gave their blood to defeat anti-Semitism. It is because I fear God that I address you tonight.
That's just me and what shapes my values, but what shapes yours? Respectfully, Madam Council President and council members, it is impossible that you or anyone else in this body can claim to still be uneducated on this topic by now or to not have access to the numbers. The International Court of Justice and UN rulings are widely published, and it is damning that in an effort to make a more neutral resolution, this council managed to insult every thinking person in Yonkers by erasing the entire West Bank, where Palestinians also have the right to live with peace and self-determination, not just in Gaza, as you propose. Widespread armed conflict that erupted is how your resolution whitewashes Israel's gleeful, disproportionate carpet bombing of homes, hospitals, schools, sanctuaries, its blockade, and its genocide as a response to October 7. Shame. Support the coalition's resolution, which recognizes both Israeli and Palestinian rights to self-determination, and Google the word Hasbara, and Google the New York Times scandal around these rape allegations.
The next speaker is Khadija Jabi, followed by Maria Alvarez.
Hello, everyone. My name is Khadija Jabi, and I would like to say that citizens of Yonkers are not to ignore the lived, devastating reality of Palestinians. More than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli Democratic government in Gaza. Impeding famine, starvation, and all-around horror and death have heavily impacted thousands of people in Gaza. Generations of people have been killed, from the youngest, like a baby or a young kid, to the oldest, like a grandfather, grandmother, grandparent. To adhere to a code of neutrality is to ignore the sense of doom and horror Palestinians within Gaza and abroad face every day. October 7th was not acceptable either. I'm not saying it was right, but this conflict did not start on October 7th, number one. Number two, the unacceptable number of hostages taken by Hamas and casualties that have occurred has not changed. But the death toll in Gaza and Palestine since October 7th has continued to increase. People are dying. Okay, let me stop. We must verbalize in the resolution that Israel is committing a genocide. The proposed resolution by the City Council states, we recognize the right of Israeli people to live in Israel in peace and the existence of a democratic Jewish state. Israel is executing this apartheid state by brutalizing entire populations of Palestinian people. Neutrality must not be the focus of the Council. It must be humanity and the recognized need to address genocide in Palestine and the extreme exploitation of labor in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Oppressed people deserve a state of peace and the fulfillment of God-given life. Neutrality breeds complicity. White supremacist, colonialist delusion will have you believe that all these people here that are speaking, that are talking about their lived experiences, that are talking about their families, that delusion will have you believe that these people are liars, that these people are telling you a farce, but that is not true. So I'm not even gonna let lies and manipulation tell me that I'm wrong, that these people are wrong. We are here, we are human, we are telling you exactly how we feel, because what is happening to Palestinians is wrong.
The next speaker is Maria Alvarez, followed by Isa Ijalat.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Maria. I'm a lifelong resident. My family came from Mexico to work in the factories that existed here in Yonkers. I wish I could speak as eloquently as all the Palestinian community that came out to speak tonight of their lived experience. And I can tell you that this is not just a Palestinian issue. We are all witnessing genocide. All of our tax dollars are paying for this genocide, and some council people here decide to ignore us. ignore calls, ignore emails, and yet they say they represent us. That's wrong. I've heard many times said in this chamber that this is just a symbolic thing that means nothing, and that's wrong too. The language in this resolution proposed by this city council erases Palestine, commits genocide with the words they are writing and trying to pass. That is wrong, and we do not stand for that. You see the community that comes out constantly, calls, emails, and you are ignoring us, and that is wrong as well. You represent us, and why do you choose not to listen to us? You choose to look away on your phones, not even paying attention, and that is wrong. This ceasefire resolution has been so tainted by you all. It is a Zionist resolution that continues with the settled colonialism, that continues to displace people in Palestine with your words, to deny their existence even. You don't even call and say that Palestine exists as a country, and that is wrong. You say Israel is a democratic state when we know it's not. They don't have equal rights for everyone. And we know half of the people that go there are probably related to these people over here. They come from Westchester and they come from New York, and this is not symbolic. So let's stop lying to ourselves and pretending it's not happening, because it is. Everyone here has blood on their hands if they do not pass a ceasefire resolution. That is what the community wants, and the language that does not erase Palestine or the lives that have been lost there. That's all I have to say tonight.
Next speaker is Issa, followed by Vanessa Argueta.
How you doing, guys? My name is Issa Agilat. I'm a Yonkers resident. I'm a Palestinian American. Growing up, I always heard cries from my grandmother about how they stole everything from her family. I was too young to understand what was going on until I got a little older. I didn't know who they were. When I finally asked her, she said the Jews took everything. So I grew up thinking that most Jewish people were bad people. It wasn't until October 7th I started learning more about Zionism and started getting the understanding that Zionism is not Judaism, that was responsible for going for my family's homeland. There are millions of people in this world, like myself, who are uneducated on what Zionism is. Some people say Zionism is to protect Judaism, or is simply saying that the Jewish people have a right to a land, and these are all lies. The Jewish people always lived in Palestine amongst the Christians and the Muslims for over 1,000 years. The Jewish people were protected by Muslim and Arab countries, and around the time they were being persecuted by Europeans and Americans. And everywhere else in the world, the state of Israel is creating a very bad image for the Jewish people. They are committing war crimes and atrocities and are using the Jewish name to cover it up. Everything they do is completely against the Jewish religion. For example, it is forbidden for Jewish people to have a land until the return of the Messiah. It is forbidden to occupy people. It is forbidden to kill. It is a very peaceful religion, and Zionism is creating more anti-Semitism rather than protecting Jewish people. I cannot tell you how many times I've had to correct people and tell them that Zionists and Jews are not, Zionists are responsible and not Jewish people. What's going on right now in Palestine is a genocide and ethnic cleansing, and I think it's important that we call it for what it is and not reword it. Nelson Mandela was labeled as a terrorist at one point. Meanwhile, he was really a freedom fighter. African Americans were stripped from their culture, and a majority of them don't even know what country their ancestors came from. The same thing is happening to my people, and I am terrified that my grandchildren will never know what Palestine really was. Over and over again, we turn a blind eye to injustice, and this world and history keeps repeating itself. And I keep hearing people say what I would have done. But the reality is, it's happening now, and we can do something. The Gazans and the Palestinians suffered long enough, and at the very least, a fair ceasefire resolution is something we should push for, as other cities are doing so as well. Yonkers is a diverse city, and yet white supremacy lobbyists like AIPAC tend to buy our politicians out. It's time for a change, and time to set the bar for other cities and stand on the right side of history. How can we call ourselves the United States when it's minorities against the white supremacist leaders? What's going on right now is similar to the Holocaust. The only difference is that it's not too late to stop this genocide going on about now. Also, I'd like to point out about the Yemeni children affairs where they stole Yemeni children and gave it to European Jews so they can mix Semitic DNA. They're calling us anti-Semitic. Meanwhile, we are Semitic as well. Also, one more thing I'd like to point out where they made it to where Ethiopian Jews back in 2013, which is less than around 10 years ago, were not allowed to have children because they were the wrong shade. So I urge you to push forward and stop this racist movement. Thank you.
You're Vanessa? Yes. All right, so Vanessa, you're going to be speaking. But after you're done, what we're going to do is circle back around and call the names of those who we called earlier who did not respond. So after Vanessa, we're going to go back to Manaf Asafin. Is that person in the chamber? Raise your hand if you are. All right, so what we'll do is after we call Vanessa, we'll go back to those names. Go ahead, Vanessa.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vanessa Argueta. I'm 23 years old and was born and raised here in Yonkers. I'm here today in opposition to the City Council's version of our ceasefire resolution. When I was younger, I used to look up to my local politicians with admiration, thinking to myself, they must be so knowledgeable about the lessons we've learned in history to be so confident in creating a better future. Except after reading your resolution, it reminded me that there actually is a lack of knowledge and basic empathy for clearly oppressed communities. Your narrative stated that because of the attacks on October 7th, Palestinians have suffered the consequence of being displaced and murdered. There's no mention of condemning Israel for the decades of war crimes committed, yet the words Hamas violently attacked are bolded in the first line of your resolution. The source of this problem is not Hamas, but they are a symptom of the problem, which is the Israeli occupation. Israel has dropped more bombs in a week than U.S. has dropped in Afghanistan in a year. How many more Palestinian lives need to be taken for all of you to acknowledge the source of this genocide and the root of our pain? Let's put this all into perspective. Every single year, you mourn the innocent lives lost in 9/11 in Sandy Hook Elementary School, yet tragedies just like these have been happening in Palestine since 1948 due to the Israeli occupation. I know you've heard of the bombs dropped in mosques, schools, hospitals, the so-called safe zones that were raided, the babies in incubators hit by airstrikes, or the children dying of heart attacks from the sounds of bombs nearby. I should not have to stand here to educate you on the acts because it is clear to me that you have already chosen to ignore them. However, maybe this example will put it into perspective. I'm sure we have all vividly remembered the earthquake we recently had. For only 30 seconds, you felt the ground shake and feared for your safety. Afterwards, you were able to call your family members and friends, turn on the news, and then continue your daily lives. Those 30 seconds was just a taste of what Palestinians experience on a daily basis. Except the ground doesn't just move beneath them. The ceiling comes down and suffocates their loved ones underneath the heavy rubble. It has been 6 months. That's 185 days of torture in a place that even the United Nations Secretary General has claimed to be hell on earth. I feel like I'm explaining why all lives don't matter until the lives of the oppressed matters first. All throughout your resolution, it's Israel first, Gaza second. That shows me that the members of your community that shows me and the members of your community that you do not prioritize the lives of black and brown individuals. Ironically, since there are people of color on your council. This resolution shouldn't be about making everyone happy. It should be about being on the right side of history. This is why the language you use is important. Why we demand you take responsibility for such ignorance that fuels this genocide by remaining neutral. I can't help but wonder if this city council would have ever spoken up for a permanent ceasefire if it wasn't for your constituents who created the resolution in the first place. Palestinians deserve to live safely just as much as the people serving in Yonkers. Thank you.
As I said earlier, the next speaker is Manaf. Manaf Raj Drew. Raj Drew.
How much time do we have?
3 minutes. You have 3 minutes.
3 minutes for 35,000 people is shameful. My name is Raj Drew. I'm so proud to be here to speak in support of Palestine and support of a permanent ceasefire. But mostly I want to speak to us, because we know, and just say how courageous we all are for being here for 3 months, for being here for folks that have been in this struggle for 75 years. And we really wish we did not have to be here. We wish that over 12,000 children that have been murdered were here instead. And everyone should fear that in our heart. And I should spend every other second in silence for those children. We should spend every second of every speech tonight and every speech forever in silence for those children. But we only have 3 minutes. We wish we didn't have to be here. We wish that over 35,000 people in Gaza who've been murdered were here, that have been murdered by the Israeli military. With my tax dollars, with all of our tax dollars. Now I want to share why I specifically feel so moved to advocate for freedom for Palestine, as I have been doing for years. Not for the past 6 months that we've witnessed a genocide live streamed to our phone, but for years. I'm here as a trans femme person, as someone who has experienced violence based on my identity. So of course I stand with anyone who faces oppression anywhere in the world, as so many queer and trans people do. When I hear people being collectively vilified for being Palestinian, I understand that. Not at all at a comparable level, but I know what that is like because I know what they say about trans folks and queer folks. I know that they say we are violent, we're a threat to children, all the things. I don't need to say them here. They're lies. I know that vilification is always intentional and always done for what we're seeing happen in Gaza, to destroy people. So for all those reasons I'm here, because this is not, you don't have to be Palestinian, you just have to be a human to understand that genocide is always wrong. There is never a justification for genocide. There never could be a justification for genocide. So just again, grateful for all of the folks who've been here for 2 months. Eid Mubarak. I know everyone would rather be somewhere else on Eid, on the final day of Ramadan, than here. But we're here, and we'll continue to be here. We won't wait for politicians. Politicians have never liberated anyone or anything. So there's no waiting for politicians. And we know we'll keep showing up in all the ways that we're going to, and we'll show up united as so many different communities, all communities united for Palestine. And I love you all. You all.
A name that we called earlier and did not respond, Ruadi Jamal. Fonten Gerara. Rebecca Lieberman.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Lieberman. I've lived in Yonkers since 2016. I'm here tonight to talk about this resolution. We're really here talking about a war that was started by an enemy of America, Hamas, backed by Iran, against a strong and important ally of the United States, Israel. We're here, were we as Americans, elected officials, citizens of Yonkers, where we stand on this conflict should be obvious. But the public discourse and understanding has become so muddled around Israel that it isn't. This proposed ceasefire resolution, which has now been tabled, is putting out a suggestion of an agreement between one entity that admits the legitimacy of the other one and one that does not. Israel has repeatedly offered Palestinians options for an independent state, which have been rejected because Hamas and other extremist factions do not accept the legitimacy of Israel as a Jewish state, period. They reject the internationally accepted borders, treaties, and laws, period, which you have heard about tonight. As the rejected hostage and ceasefire deals show, Hamas wants this war regardless of the numbers of their own people killed. Given the facts on the ground, who started the war, how it has been executed by Hamas in Gaza, from the diverted aid to the sexual torture of hostages taken October 7th and beyond, and their aim to annihilate Israel and Jews, there can be no neutral resolution, even from this great geographic remove. The public discourse has become so distorted around Israel that liberals endorse the most fundamentalist group imaginable, Hamas, backed by Islamist extremists in Iran. These groups advocate the murder of LGBTQ people, the subjugation of women, they reject democracy, they torture women for not covering their hair. I could go on. The bottom line, no outbursts. The bottom line is that Jew hate, which we have heard tonight spewed talking about Zionists and AIPAC, Jew hate has blinded people to the war being fought here, which is between democracy, American values, individual liberty, and a fundamentalism of the worst kind, the kind that gets girls shot in the face for going to school. There cannot be a neutral resolution here, just as there cannot be in the war between Ukraine and Russia. Thank you.
A name that we called earlier and did not respond. Just want to make sure you're either here or not. Diana Sanchez. Okay, moving on. Harry Silloway.
Go ahead, Harry.
Good evening, council members. I am here this evening to ask for your moral courage. There is no question about the genocide that's going on in Gaza. You all know it. You've heard it tonight. You've heard every example. You've seen it. You've seen starvation. You've seen the destruction of communities. You've seen the death of children. It is an intentional genocide. It is the intent of the Israeli government to destroy the Palestinian people. That has been their explicit intention from the beginning of Zionism. But I ask you to move past political calculation, political calculus. Not to pretend. Let's look at the truth. Let's not pretend that there are two sides to this story. There is only one side, and that is the genocide of the people of Gaza, and it must stop.
That's right.
To say in your resolution that Israel is a democratic state, you know is a lie. You know in your hearts it's a lie, because you cannot have a democratic state and have apartheid. Every humanitarian human rights organization has called it apartheid. International law prohibits occupation of another people's territory. We know all this. You know all this. I'm a member of Jewish Voice for Peace. Emphasize peace. And Jewish Voice for Peace has laid rest to the propaganda that Jews, all Jews, support Israel. It is not true. There are millions of Jewish people and their allies and the Palestinian Solidarity Movement that know that Jews do not support Israel. Jews do not support occupation, apartheid, human rights violations, death of children, displacement. We cannot support that. The Jewish faith does not allow us to support that. So the crack in the wall has been sprung. People around the world, people in this country, people in Yonkers know that Israel is not a Jewish state. Israel is a Zionist state. And we do not support it. And finally, I ask you to consider your situation. I'm asking you for the moral high ground, to take a moral position here. Your children in 5 years or 10 years will ask you, Mama, Papa, you were on the city council at the time of the genocide. At the time of the genocide, what will you tell your children? Did you stand for justice? Did you stand for freedom? Did you stand for peace? Or do you stand for genocide? Thank you.
The next speaker is Dr. Eli Goldner, followed by Donica Basilica.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Dr. Eli Goldner. I worked at Montefiore and HIP for 36 years here in Yonkers. Before I retired, I think it's a pleasure and an honor for me to be able to speak at a democratic function like this, everybody saying his own piece. And I was a private PCP, and I treated all types of people, every nation, nationality. I loved them all. I just have a few comments, and I hope they're taken with an open heart. I read your agenda, and I never really knew what a city council does. And I saw you have several resolutions on the table recognizing April 15th as a National American Sign Language Day. Resolution number 2, recognizing the week of 4/14 as National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, which is very nice to see. I Googled what a city council does, and in the following I found out. New York City, Yonkers, introduces and votes on legislation having to do with all aspects of city life, negotiates the city's budget with the mayor, monitors city agencies, approves zoning changes, apparently everything to do with the city. New York City, Yonkers City, that sort of thing. Nowhere does it say anything about international matters. And I was wondering, how is it that we are now talking about international matters when this is supposed to be a civil city forum? So I went back and I was wondering whether or not all the bad things that happened in the last several years, dozens of years, if this was also acted on in this forum and other city forums, New York City, etc. And everybody, I'm sure, is aware. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that's over 500,000 people maimed and killed. I'm not really sure that there's many people raising their voices against that. The Syrian civil war, Arab against Muslim. We're talking about between 2014 to today, you have between 580,000 to 618,000 deaths. Nobody's raising their voice as vociferously as I hear today. How about the Chinese repression of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province? You're talking about 1 million Muslims that were incarcerated by the Russians, and by the Chinese, and we're not hearing about that. So I think that we should really allow this council to deal with stuff that's local, not international, which we're not trained for. I would speak more, but to go over, I think the resolution is a fairly good resolution.
Can you wrap it up, please?
There are problems with it, but anyway, thank you for allowing me to speak.
Next speaker. Donica will be followed by Philip Armstrong.
Good evening. Does everyone hear me okay? Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Donika. I'm a native New Yorker and a Yonkers resident. I'm not Palestinian. I'm not a part of any fringe anti-Semitic organization, or any organization for that matter, because I know someone previously mentioned organizations. I'm simply a human being standing before you today because I cannot live with myself if I don't take at least some action for what is taking place in Palestine today. Recent events have stirred profound reflection, challenging our perception of civilized modern societies and their commitment to well-being, rights, and prosperity for all citizens. Over the past 6 months, we've observed a troubling pattern of selective empathy in our nation's media coverage, discussions, and governmental responses. It has become increasingly evident that Palestinian lives are undervalued, compelling us to confront the biases that influence public discourse and policy. Growing up in the United States, I was taught to value progress and learn from historical injustices. However, the present situation in Gaza starkly contradicts this notion of advancement and evolution. The staggering loss of life in Gaza, over 33,000 Palestinians killed, and for perspective, that is the entire town and population of Eastchester. And the number is just growing. With half of that being innocent children. And I'm sorry, guys, I know this is exhausting for everyone here this evening. But I assure you we would all prefer to be somewhere else tonight. And again, I appreciate your attention. Where was I? Including 200 aid workers, constitutes nothing short of a humanitarian catastrophe. Israel's actions have not only claimed lives, but also ravaged essential infrastructure vital for Gaza's future. I'm sure you guys have heard enough of this all evening. But this didn't start on October 7th, as many people have mentioned. Nor did it originate in self-defense or hostage rescue endeavors. Rather, it's deeply rooted in the systematic violations of human rights perpetuated during Israel's 75-year occupation of Palestinian territories. One example of this: the Israeli government's total control over all water resources in the past 75 years, including the collection of rainwater, even in Jordan, coupled with discriminatory distribution practices for 75 years, has resulted in dire consequences. So today, governmental response over the past election that is taking place in the organization, not Palestine.
Donica will be followed by Philip Armstrong.
Good evening. Does everyone hear me okay? Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Donika. I'm a native New Yorker and a Yonkers resident. I'm not Palestinian. Troubling pattern of selective empathy in our nation's media coverage, discussions, and governmental responses. It has become increasingly evident that Palestinian lives are undervalued, compelling us to confront the biases that influence public discourse and policy. Growing up in the United States, I was taught to value progress and learn from historical injustices. However, the present situation in Gaza starkly contradicts this notion of advancement and evolution. The staggering loss of life in Gaza, over 33,000 Palestinians killed, and for perspective, that is the entire town and population of Eastchester. And the number is just growing. With half of that being innocent children. And I'm sorry, guys, I know this is exhausting for everyone here this evening. But I assure you we would all prefer to be somewhere else tonight. And again, I appreciate your attention. Where was I? Including 200 aid workers, constitutes nothing short of a humanitarian catastrophe. Israel's actions have not only claimed lives, but also ravaged essential infrastructure vital for Gaza's future. I'm sure you guys have heard enough of this all evening. But this didn't start on October 7th, as many people have mentioned. Nor did it originate in self-defense or hostage rescue endeavors. Rather, it's deeply rooted in the systematic violations of human rights perpetuated during Israel's 75-year occupation of Palestinian territories. One example of this: the Israeli government's total control over all water resources in the past 75 years, including the collection of rainwater, even in Jordan, coupled with discriminatory distribution practices for 75 years, has resulted in dire consequences. So today, 96% of Gaza's water supply is contaminated and undrinkable, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis and pushing Gaza to the brink of famine. Israel's indiscriminate bombings, often targeting entire neighborhoods and inadvertently causing harm to its own hostages, proof they've killed their own hostages. It prompts us to question who stands to benefit most if Gaza, Israeli-occupied Gaza, is devoid of Palestinians entirely. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker is Philip Armstrong, followed by Danaya Silva.
Good evening. Everybody here knows me, Philip Armstrong. I came to speak on a couple items that haven't been spoken of yet. One was going to be the properties at 88 and 90 Elliott Avenue. I'm glad to see something finally being done with this. I see you're also voting on an environmental impact study tonight, which I kind of don't understand yet. Somebody tried to explain it to me earlier, but it was a little bit out of my limited ability to comprehend. The other is there's a couple of large grants on the agenda tonight. Now, we recently had an IG report out by the City of Yonkers IG about the Nepahan Community Center, where we gave them $200,000 of our money.
Mr. Armstrong, if it's not on the agenda.
The grants are on the agenda.
The grants for Nepahan Community Center?
Not for Nepahan Community Center.
Please stick to the topic. There are a lot of speakers tonight.
The topic is that these grants are given, and nobody within the city administration bothers to check to make sure the money's going where it's supposed to. Now, that can't happen. They're giving our tax dollars away, and there's no audited financials from the areas they're giving it to. Another item, what everybody's speaking on tonight on the resolution for Gaza, I consider this council to be just political cowards. Each and every one of you, political cowards. We have a resolution here that's got nothing to do with say one side is right or one side is wrong. It's about peace. Now, I'm a Vietnam veteran, which Mike Breen here often talks about thanking us for our service. When I came back from Vietnam and the American Legion asked me to come and join, when I told them I was against the war, the American Legion told me to go to hell. So we have to be careful what we do. We cannot take sides. This is saying that innocent people from both sides should not be dying. We should not be letting either side kill each other. For us saying that only says that we're human. To not say it, for each and every one of you for not saying it, means that you're just bending to political pressure, you're bending to votes. And it's just cowardness. Cowardness. It's beyond me how, I have members of my family, my cousins that are in the IDF, serving in the Israeli army. I have lived with Palestinian neighbors for many, many years. Great families, great people. I don't see why we're not saying that both sides. Now, my cousins, when they come back out of the IDF, they're all going to have PTSD. Many of the soldiers are. Many of the people are. Many of the people on both sides will have this, and we're deciding to ignore that because we might lose a couple of votes here, a couple of votes there. It's not worth losing our morals and not having the political courage to stand up and do the right thing.
The next speaker, Danaya Silva, followed by Isabella Iannone.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to make this brief and quick. I stand here disappointed to say that this is the city council that represents us, Yonkers, the third largest city in New York. It's disappointing to see the lack of care for the Palestinian lives and not calling it what it is, a genocide. This is not a war. We are witnessing the erasure of Palestinians that started in 1948, not on October 7th, 2023. Children are dying of starvation. Pregnant women are being raped by Israeli soldiers in front of their families. Doctors in Al-Shifa Hospital being shot as they try to help their patients. So many more atrocities that fill our hearts with pain. It sparks the question, where is your humanity? We asked for a ceasefire resolution that would represent the Palestinian people, but instead we received one reeking of Zionism and passive language. To call on a ceasefire without condemning the actions of Israel is not a win. This did not just casually happen. Even if you're trying to be fair, you cannot minimize the atrocities in Gaza and the West Bank. This genocide goes beyond borders and religions. As a Mexican American who has been a resident of Yonkers for 17 years and who has faced racism and displacement in this country, in Yonkers, I sympathize with the Palestinian community. What is happening is something that has never been seen. It is not normal and should not be normalized. Your language normalizes it. May we move forward to end this genocide, recognize our Palestinian brothers and sisters, and do the right things by passing the ceasefire resolution proposed by the Ceasefire Coalition. Thank you.
The next speaker is Isabella Iannone, followed by Veronica Matus.
Hi, my name is Isabella Iannone. I'm actually from White Plains, but I'm here to speak on behalf of the ceasefire resolution that's been tabled. And I just want to thank you guys in the beginning for your work that you do for Yonkers. And I just wanted to say that, speaking on behalf of just myself, I'm the descendant of people that have suffered from war. My family has been bombed by U.S. bombs. I know, I've seen what the devastation does to entire generations of people. And I cannot sit idly by and watch as the United States does it again and again and again. I know that this is just a city council and that I'm not speaking to people who literally write the checks for all these bombs, but I am hoping and I am praying that just standing here will do something, because I cannot stand to see what happened to my family happen to anybody else, no matter what. You guys on the city council have the ability to be the first city in Westchester to pass a ceasefire resolution. I know we're all talking about the semantics and the language, and yes, I would like this language to be changed. But just the fact that it's on the board, that we're even talking about trying to get a ceasefire is still, it is an accomplishment. I know that I would at least hope that when my family was being bombed in Nicaragua, that there were Americans trying to stop it. And I know that the language being used against Palestinians is the same language being used against Nicaraguans. But I'm going to tell you that my mom was 6 years old. Okay? Like, she's not some kind of crazy communist, just like any other 6-year-old Palestinian isn't some kind of crazy terrorist. And I'm here just to ask you guys to know that even though it may seem symbolic, it can act as a catapult for our needs as Westchester residents, especially as Yonkers residents, and as a catapult for good change, for people who can stand up to our government and say, enough is enough. I don't want to see any more bombs being dropped on kids. Thank you.
Veronica? And Veronica will be followed by Brent Delman.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Veronica Matus-Godoy, a longtime Yonkers resident, a longtime independent activist, advocate, a woman, a mother like the mothers in Palestine, and a taxpayer. I was also born in Chile with a large Palestinian community called Chilistinians. We also left Chile because the U.S. funded a coup d'etat which murdered my own family members and stole my siblings and told my mother her children were dead. So we know exactly what a genocide is, what injustice is. I have written for months about my mother's retaining wall, which fell during Hurricane Ida in 2021, and it has fallen on deaf ears by the three-term mayor, Jamal Bowman, and Senator Chuck Schumer. Everyone my mother and I have voted for. And now an engineer has stolen my mother's money, and the only council person who listened, cared, and visited her home is Miss Corazon Piñera. So it disgusts me when I read and hear another council member threaten her while being a Latina woman herself. You get rich with our tax dollars, bomb with our tax dollars, and murder with our tax dollars. You keep funding a Zionist state whose Messiah has not yet arrived, and yet you all still don't listen to the people, your constituents. You're trying to gentrify our black and brown community here, our south side of Yonkers, while trying again to raise our taxes for things like an excise tax, for this, and COVID coverage, for the police. But yet you forget the nurses, the doctors, and everyone else who's an essential worker. What's the point? The corruption in Yonkers must end. When Mitch McConnell said the American people have substantial power, I was listening, and here we are, halfway around the world, advocating and protesting for Palestine's freedom and their land back. You starved the Muncie people whose territory this is, indigenous people, and it should be no surprise you're doing it again and again. The capitalists violate people, steal land, not their own, rape women and children, and then you have the gall to tell us what to do, how to feel, and how to advocate. No, we demand you pass the community ceasefire resolution, and not your council members' resolution. Ceasefire now. End this genocide by approving the people's resolution. Don't keep postponing this because it's illegal. Okay? It's illegal what you're doing.
Please wrap up.
You know it, and I know it. Stand on the right side. Viva, viva Palestina!
The next speaker is Brent Delman.
Thank you, City Council members, and thank you, everybody who's taking precious time out of your lives to hear about this very important issue. Unfortunately, I don't have a prepared speech here, but I'm going to speak to you from the heart. I'm a longtime resident of Yonkers. I'm a proud recipient of the Gen Y Business Leadership Award by the Mayor of Yonkers. I'm also a board member of the oldest synagogue in Yonkers, and I'm a former zoning board member, so I can appreciate some of what you're having to deal with here today. And it's not easy. It's not easy for any of you, and it's not easy for America right now, because there's a radical element that is taking over. There's a radical element that we see in our midst today. And if you can imagine how difficult it is to be in this room, you can imagine how difficult it is to walk around with a yarmulke these days. It's very difficult. I have a son. We walk around the neighborhood, our neighborhood that was very safe just a few months ago, and he's terrified of wearing his yarmulke. He has to wear a baseball cap now. We get dirty looks, and we get screamed at by people in our neighborhood, by Palestinians, Muslims. I'm not exactly sure where they're from, but it's very unsafe. It's very unsafe. And this is what we as a Jewish community are going through. and it's unfortunate. And my question, and it sort of relates to what some of the others here brought up tonight, that there's so many issues going on around the world. You know, just in the last few weeks, there was a Nigerian radical Islamic extremist group that kidnapped hundreds of children. I don't know if anything has been brought to the council regarding that. There's Iran executes hundreds of people, and there was a city called Yarmouk in Syria, a couple 100,000 Palestinians that no longer exists. It no longer exists. They were starved, they were killed, they were massacred. I don't think that anybody here has ever heard about this issue. But you know, what's taking place right now is what's taking place in this country right now.
Mr. Brent, please hold. Can we please stop with the outburst in the chamber before we ask everyone to leave the chamber? Thank you.
Thank you. What we're experiencing right now is classic anti-Semitism under a different guise. They call it anti-Zionism, but it is classic anti-Zionism. And it's what my parents and grandparents felt in Europe during the Holocaust and pogroms and all the way back to the Inquisitions. And I now understand what they suffered. And all I can tell you, there are two things. About 75 years ago, there were Jewish communities, thriving Jewish communities all throughout the Middle East. They don't exist anymore. There were thriving Christian communities all throughout the Middle East. They don't exist anymore because we're dealing with a very intolerant, radical element that we're seeing in our midst. And the last thing I just wanted to say is, if Hamas lays down their arms, there will be peace. If Israel lays down their arms, there will be no more Israel. Thank you.
Council President, Mr. Delman was the last speaker this evening.
Thank you.
I was on the list. My name is Joanne Robinson, and I was on the list, and I called the city clerk's office. And he said, I can tell you to whom I spoke, because I asked the name of the person.
That's right, Joe.
Have a seat.
Council President, we do have three other names of people who have signed up. Lena Shoa Savoca. And again, I apologize. I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your name, Lena.
Hello, my name is Lana Shawa Savoca. I'm a Palestinian American with deep connections to Yonkers. I've worked in Yonkers over 10 years. I've lived in Yonkers. I have friends and connections here. I'm the daughter of a refugee. My father escaped Gaza in 1967 on foot, carrying nothing more than a pistol to Egypt. He escaped because the Israelis were drowning many of the young boys my father's age in the Wadi Gaza. Growing up, I would visit Gaza every summer. I would stay with my grandparents, and I would spend my summers with my cousins and my aunts and my uncles. My family, the Shawa family, is a large family in Gaza, and our family goes back over 3,000 years. A rich heritage, beautiful people, the most generous people that you would ever meet. Since October 7th, I've lost over 90 family members. My entire family has been displaced. There is nothing left. Even the cemetery that my grandfather, Hashem Shawa, who started the Bank of Palestine, where he was resting, has been desecrated. All of my relatives in the Jabali cemetery, they have all been desecrated. This is the list of all my family members since October 7th that have been killed. I came here because I want to speak about a relative of mine, Dr. Ragda Shawa. Last month, 2 Israeli soldiers came to her home in Gaza City, demanding that she leave immediately as her home was marked for bombing. My aunt, 85 years old, in a wheelchair, asked them, "Where should we go?" Her 4 sisters were all sick, being cared for by nurses in their home in Gaza City. The soldiers quickly apologized, and they granted them safety, and they said that their home would be spared. Last week, despite being assured their safety, an Israeli tank killed all of them. Dr. Ragda Shawa was a pillar of our society. She treated me when I was 1.5 years. When I was sick, she treated many of the Gazan children. She was a pillar of our family. She had life. She had meaning. These women could be your family members. These bombs, these 2,000-pound bunker bombs that are dropping on my family. I still have so many family. We are paid for these bombs. What makes this even more sinister about my family members that are being actively massacred and murdered every day is that my taxpayer dollars are going to murder them. City Councilman Breen,
Ma'am,
how many
you have already
streets
passed
in
your 3
Yonkers
minutes.
could be repaved with that money that's going to Israel? That $14 billion is going to Israel. Councilwoman Diaz, how many children
Ms.
in
Lana,
Yonkers, needy
Ms.
children?
Lana, you have passed your 3 minutes.
I
please.
understand. I just want to ask you from the bottom of my heart, please, please, call for a just ceasefire. Please use the right language. Please act on behalf of humanity, please. I'm sorry that I'm so emotional, but this is really, do the right thing.
The next speaker. The next speaker is Judy Weiner.
I just want to add that the Palestinian...
The next speaker is Judy Weiner.
We will clear the chamber if we don't stop with the outbursts. That's my last time saying it tonight.
My name is Julie Weiner, and I'm Jewish. What Judaism meant in my family was the teaching from Deuteronomy, justice, justice, shalt thou pursue. And over again, rabbis would teach, why does Deuteronomy repeat tzedek, tzedek? Why is the word for justice repeated twice? And the answer was, because it is so important. It is your highest priority to seek and to fight for justice. My parents both joined the military during World War II and were proud of the role that the United States military played in defeating Nazi Germany and ending the Holocaust. That phrase, justice, justice, there's a terrible pun that's made about what it means. Justice, justice, shalt thou pursue means justice for everyone, not justice for just us. And the Zionist movement has done two terrible things to Judaism. It has turned that phrase into just us, just listen to our pain. I've heard over and over again from Israelis and those defending this genocide, I have no more room in my heart for Palestinian suffering. Well, this is not something that just started on October 7th. I've been an active member of my synagogue. Oh, and by the way, thank you to your father, Councilwoman Robinson. He inspired me to join a synagogue, goodness knows, 30 years ago. And I have to say that the Westchester Jewish Council absolutely does not represent all the Jews in Westchester, nor is it a democratic organization. Most members of my synagogue were appalled when the WJC decided to push the county executive to adopt what's called the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. The definition isn't so bad. The problem is that the examples used include criticism of the state of Israel. So it's essentially anti-democratic, it's essentially anti-free speech, it's essentially attempts to deny human rights. I just want to say one thing about one word. I don't like the pronunciation of Hamas that I'm hearing, so I want to give you a little translation into Hebrew. The Israelis pervert or destroy or make a pun on the word Hamas. The word Hamas means thief, and it's Israel who is the thief. Israel has been stealing Palestinian land, property, and lives from the beginning. In 2014, I held a Tisha B'Av service on the street to grieve for the terrible, terrible tragedies that have befallen the Jewish people, the fall of the First Temple, the fall of the Second Temple. But what we were grieving during that 2014 service on the street in a ceremony written by the rabbis of Jewish Voice for Peace was the terrible loss of empathy and human sympathy that the Zionist continual assault on human life of Palestinians has encouraged. So I hate as an American that this war is being forged with our money, and I hate as a Jew that it is being done in my name.
Next speaker is Ms. Robinson.
I'll preface this. Good evening. My name is Joanne Robinson. My family has lived in Yonkers since 1904. I am in my 8th decade. Good evening, City Council President, members of the City Council. I am here to speak on the proposed resolution regarding the ceasefire. Today and for the last 6 months, There, an entire mass of humanity is suffering from lack of food, water, health, and hospital care. Medicine being prevented from being brought into Gaza. Children's clothes, hygiene kits, even wheelchairs. In my humble view, this is genocide. A nation under siege. Yes. Innocent people being treated like this is reprehensible. Cut off from electricity and water. Could we here in Yonkers survive without clean water, electricity? I don't think so. Innocent children, mothers, families living under such conditions. The world has viewed this horror as we in Yonkers daily view it through the media. Cities and hamlets like Albany, Newburgh, Chicago, Connecticut, and across our nation are calling for a ceasefire. The human onslaught of children losing limbs, families destroyed, separated, mental trauma, losing homes, farmland, it must stop. My tax dollars are helping to keep it going. You, our city fathers, are protectors against injustice. I call upon you and urge our government to help bring about peace. Stop the bombing and bring about a resolution that truly understands the immensity of the suffering and will bring about a respect for the Palestinian community, who for a long time have been injured, ignored, and denied participation in determining their destiny in a democratic, just world, who professes to all of us, its people, regardless of race, color, and ethnicity. Call for the ceasefire. You have a conscience. It is you, our city fathers, who deal with us all the time, every day, to make the world a better place. And don't tell me about tax dollars. Those are my tax dollars that are being used to bomb and kill people. The Congress can ask for money to kill, but when they ask for health care, when they ask for education, when they ask for housing, when they ask for infrastructure, when they ask for jobs and employment, they don't have the money. But to kill, they always have the money. Stop it. You are the protectors of your constituents. Don't be foolish. Think of what you do in your heart. And killing people should not be. You should stop it and call for a ceasefire. Thank you.
To our office in the time frame allotted, and she is the final speaker this evening.
Thank you. With that being the final speaker who has signed up to speak at tonight's Committee of the Whole, we will hereby close this Committee of the Whole. Thank you.